right, call to order the July 17th, 2017 meeting of the Arlington Redevelopment Board, recorded by ACMI. First on the agenda this evening is a zoning recodification update following the public hearing last Thursday night. Jenny.
All right. I think everybody was at the forum. Great. I don't have to tell you what happened at the forum then, right? So I thought we could use this opportunity to kind of just talk about sort of the highlights of, you know, what we heard from the forum. We had about 40 people in attendance. We're still working on the meeting summary. The zoning recodification working group had a meeting on Friday to debrief the forum and also talk about the next steps in terms of what we need from the consultant for follow-up, and also set some deadlines in terms of getting feedback on the second reading draft. And so I thought I can just quickly run through what we heard at the forum, just some of the very, very high level points. There was lots of feedback. High level, we heard, the biggest thing we heard pretty repeatedly is we really need to have an improved way of communicating what has changed between the existing zoning bylaw and what the proposed amendments will be. Right now, we currently have a 2-page document that was really just intended for the public forum, but we'll need a much more detailed version of all of what the edits mean, what's related to case law, what's related to, you know, changes, inconsistencies, etc. The things that we said that we would do. So that kind of level of detail was called, I think every single table commented on that issue. We had a lot of feedback on the pros and cons of moving the sign regulations rather out of the zoning bylaw and into the town bylaw. There were some questions about that, so there's some follow-up needed on that particular issue. We had a range of comments about definitions, how specific to make them versus less detailed, so shorter versus longer, easier to understand terms that people typically look for versus what the current definite terms that are used in the bylaw. And then we had some questions about more recent case law that we may not have referenced, or questions about the laws that were referenced as part of the zoning recodification update. And then I think the last thing was just how to deal with the issue of we're moving the illustrations and graphics, or we're eliminating rather, the illustrations and graphics from the current zoning bylaw, but what are we going to do to replace those, if anything? So we need some follow-up on that as well. I think that those were just having gone through the summary of meeting notes, those were the five of the biggest things that came up. There were lots of other comments that were received that evening. We had some presentation that was done by RKG and myself. Then we had table discussion. So the summary of the table discussion comments is what we'll provide once we complete them. And then when the zoning recodification working group met on Friday, we talked about the second reading draft and how to kind of, how do we tackle reviewing that draft? When do we need to get comments back to RKG? And then what's the process for sort of moving forward? And we set a date of August 4th for the committee, for the working group rather, to provide some feedback, at least internally, to myself and Laura. And then we, as a working group, divided up sections of the new zoning bylaw to review. Of course, as always, as with every part of this process, the ARB should also figure out a way to provide its own comments as part of this process. I think one issue of follow-up is we want to use that same comment form that we provided from the first reading draft. So we'll send it around again as part of the second reading draft so that you can, if you have individual comments, you basically, many of you used it already, but it's basically a grid that shows who's making the comment, what page you're commenting on, and what you're suggesting the change might be.
Can we also say that in addition to reviewing those sections, the working group members would make an attempt to map the changes for that section?
I thought we were talking about that.
Map the changes?
Between,
start looking
like
at
what's
to understand
changed.
what has changed. Yeah, if possible, yes. But I think that we said that in all likelihood, between RKG, the consultant, and staff, we would likely have to pick up how to really document all of the changes. But yes, if you can do that, that would be, of course, also excellent.
Okay.
And then just quickly, this is the timeline that was shared at the meeting. This is basically directly from the PowerPoint, sorry, where everybody's asking what's the next step, when does the board officially come into play? As we talked about, at least the last time I was at an ARB meeting, we have yet to set the special town meeting date because the Board of Selectmen sets that date. And then once we have that date, we can work backwards from there to set our public hearings. My estimation is that the special town meeting will happen in the late fall. And so the hearing draft will be ready by the early September timeframe. So we can have a public forum, and then we'll start to have some public hearings, probably 3 is my guess, before we get to special town meeting. So we set a tentative date for the next public forum, which is public forum number 2 for September 14th. Still need to confirm that date, may need to push it out a little bit, depending upon many other variables, like when do we get the next reading, the next draft, and also scheduling reasons. So I think that's where I wanted to go with the conversation about recodification, and just answer any questions that may come up, and also ask David if you have anything additional to report from the working group.
Well, I facilitated one of the tables, and my table had good productive discussions and not a lot of controversy, and in some very positive comments from a couple of people who had a chance to look at the current draft and felt that the new organization and navigation was very helpful. And I heard the same things that everyone else did, that people wanted to know exactly what was changing from the existing bylaw. And there were some process concerns that were discussed in the room, and some a little bit around substantive changes versus organizational changes. But overall, I thought it was a very productive session, but I can't say, I can't speak for the other tables.
Any other feedback?
Yeah, a few things. First, I should say that I'm teaching Thursday nights in the fall, so I won't be able to be there if it's on September 14th, because that's a Thursday night. Everyone, except one person, I think, at the table that I facilitated, was not there because they were interested in adding clarity and making it easier to use the bylaws, but because they had a specific problem with the bylaws. So I think they participated very well, and some of them have tried to figure out what to do with the bylaws, or tried to figure out why something was happening in their neighborhood with the bylaws, but that wasn't really the reason they were there. The thread that ran from the table was, one, people need illustrations to understand this, and I think I would make a distinction between lawyers and developers and architects who deal with these things all the time and probably don't need illustrations, and just everyone else who doesn't deal with them very often, for whom illustrations might be particularly helpful. I'm not a real fan of illustrations in zoning codes, but I love to have appendices that are sort of like, this is illustrative of this is illustrative of that, where it's not legally binding to the town, but does give some examples of what that is, and I think that would be a really nice possibility for hyperlinks on the website. So there was a lot in my group about hyperlinks and hyperlinking the definitions. Where I work now, we have an online product, and we have a pop-up glossary where every term that's defined is in a different color, And if you hover your pointer over it, the glossary term pops up, so you're not even having to go somewhere else and trying to figure it out. So I think there are lots of ways to do it, but it's a little expensive, and then somebody has to maintain it and pay money for the maintenance of it afterward, but it's actually pretty nice and pretty easily available to do something like that with definitions online.
My group talked about, well, had a similar discussion, but was talking about whether it should be something completely external to the bylaw, just some kind of guide with illustrative examples that was very definitely not part of the bylaw.
Mine did too. Mine said, you know, if you could come up with a few common scenarios that homeowners deal with, you could have little, like, if this is what you want to do, here's how you walk through the bylaws. If you want to build a new garage on your property, here's what you need to look at, here's what you have to do. Yeah, so there's a lot of discussion about that too. Again, not for the professional who uses it on a regular basis, but for the layperson who might need to go to it once or twice. The other comment was not knowing how it gets interpreted afterward. That once it's out there, how do you know what the building inspectors are really doing with it, and how do you know what the planning department is really doing with it, and maybe there can start being a compilation of decisions that are made afterwards. So if somebody wonders, you know, how did you interpret this, they could go and see whether it had been interpreted somewhere along the way by someone, so there was an idea about how that particular provision's been interpreted. That doesn't have to happen by the time, you know, the bylaws are recodified, but I think it's an interesting thing to think about to do afterwards. So I think those were the major sort of things, along with not being able to understand parts of it.
Parts of the zoning bylaw.
Yeah, currently.
Yeah.
There was one other thing that came up in my group, and I'm not sure whether it was effectively captured in the notes, but it came up in a discussion of the way the tables are set up now and in the revised draft. If something is explicitly allowed, then there's something in that spot in the table, like an SP for it's allowed by special permit. And then there are a lot of blanks. And somebody said, well, if it's not already explicit somewhere in there as to what a blank means, it should be. But the related point that was brought up is with technology changing rapidly and what you can do with a building changing relatively rapidly, particularly with energy efficiency and sustainability. There was a request for some kind of process to try to get permission to do something that wasn't expressly permitted by the bylaw, but might still be desirable.
Okay.
And the person who brought it up was specifically talking about like net zero homes.
Oh, yeah. I know what you mean. And I think I saw something like about this in the comments and wondered what that meant. But now I think I understand.
Okay.
Good.
Any other comments or questions about the process?
I called Jenny, and she and I spoke really briefly, and because I've started reading through the draft, not comparing it to the current bylaw, and not comparing it to the audit, but just if I picked it up and was reading it, what would I think about it? A number of things concerned me in the first few pages that I read, and I will write comments about them, but I wonder, and I'm not sure whether we might have to have a session before the public hearings, if a lot of us have those sorts of questions to try to sort them out among ourselves. I'm not sure, but we may want to think about building in a little time to do that.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I was glad for the phone call, and I would completely support, you know, having a much more detailed conversation just about recodification. I think we also should just building into that. It's not just about the bylaw itself and the content of it and how we interpret it or use it or think it's more usable to the general public or everybody else who touches it, but it's also the public outreach that we need to do between now and through town meeting. And I do think that that warrants some attention.
Yeah.
I also think that the next part of the agenda, which is our goals, could be part of that conversation. So we might need more time on that as well. And I'm open to, you know, we could meet on another evening, we could, you know, it could be a special meeting. We can talk about it, because I think the next August 7th and August 21st you have hearings, and then we have 2 meetings in September, but since we don't exactly know when the public hearings are going to have to start, we don't, you know, there's some unknowns. Maybe we want to have this, if we want to schedule another meeting, we should do it on a night when it's not the typical ARB meeting night, as a suggestion.
That makes sense.
So
That would be the only agenda item.
that would be the only agenda item, yeah.
Okay.
So I'm open to how to take care of that.
All right. Other comments? Anything? All right, moving on. Agenda submissions policy and timeline.
All right, so I think in your, actually, this is something from the last agenda item, which is, this is the, the previous agenda item, but this was you should have received something that looks like this the last time around. This is how the consultant would like comments on the second reading draft. So hopefully you have that form still somewhere. It's pretty straightforward. So
I'll email it to you.
Is it a Word document?
Yeah.
You can just email it back to Laura or me. Okay, so on this, when we set up Novus Agenda, which is what is supposed to eliminate all of this paper, sorry.
We're not used to it.
We're not there yet. We ideally should have a companion sort of policy adopted with a timeline for when we will accept submissions. And I say this for 2 reasons. One, it would be easier to manage the online agenda and document system for Amy, the administrative assistant, and myself, who has a review, function over things. And then also for you to make sure that you are getting things in an optimal time. And then for the applicant who wishes to get things to us after the deadline, to ensure that we stop getting things after the deadline so that you're not getting additional papers that you haven't reviewed yet, that weren't in your packet but come to the meeting on the night of a public hearing, which happens frequently. So I thought it would be helpful to at least have a policy. This is pretty similar to the Novus agenda system, and then this policy are similar to how the Board of Selectmen approach their agendas. I made some edits with Amy's assistance because she posts everything. But I'm open to if you want more time to review things, if you think package should be assembled earlier, we can do that. So I wanted to make it a conversation.
So was all of this ad hoc up to this point?
I wouldn't say so, no. I think that we have, in the past, pretty much consistently accepted things through Thursday or Friday before the meeting,
Yes.
and then built out an agenda.
The initial filing is driven by the public hearing notice that has to go in, so that's about 3.5, almost 4 weeks ahead. So we have to have at least the application and the basic information. We give it a docket number, and then it goes in the paper. And then sometimes we don't get the rest of the stuff till the week of, or maybe the week before. And then you always get new stuff at your meeting, almost consistently.
Right, Jean?
I was a little confused about one thing.
Okay.
the agenda material submission ends for some people on Wednesday, but then material submitters says no later than 3 p.m. on Thursday. So some of these are Thursday, but the second box or row on the chart says Wednesday prior to meeting, but then in the narrative below it's always Thursday. So it's a little confusing between those two.
Yeah, that needs to be Wednesday at 10, I guess.
For which?
Material submitters, under material submitters A, it's Wednesday at 10.
And there was another one, I think. No, maybe it was just A.
Yeah, that one's supposed to be
And
10 a.m.
then,
Wednesday. Oh, is there another one under there?
B should also say
Yes.
10 a.m. Wednesday to tell you if they're not.
right,
Okay.
yeah, so that, just to square them up, because they seem
Thank
to be a
you.
little contradictory in terms
Yeah.
of the dates.
That's what it should be. And the reason for the time is needed between when we get the materials versus when we finalize everything in the system.
Right.
I think Amy is mostly able to immediately upload things to the agenda. She's been doing that pretty consistently. Like as in we get an agenda item and she puts everything into the agenda, like populates it, and then uploads all of the related material online. But it doesn't always arrive in a timely way. So that's why we wanted a deadline.
So then in the row above it where it says time frame, any time prior to meeting date, which seems to be any time prior to meeting date, should it be any time? Well, I mean, I'm assuming that the general public can submit, even when they show up at the meeting, they can give us things, but for everyone else, should it be, you know, any time prior to the Wednesday before the meeting date?
Anytime prior to the deadline.
What, something
It
like
should
that,
be.
right?
You mean on the first row?
Right.
Agenda. I mean, the reason I was keeping that open-ended is because somebody might say, well, I have a topic that I'd like to discuss, but I don't know exactly when the right meeting is to discuss it. And so that would be up to me and you to decide what meeting we want to put it on. If it's not a public hearing and it's simply a topical item, I think we should leave that open and not like immediately assume it will go on to the next meeting. There are some topics that we can't always put on the next meeting. We put them on a couple meetings from now. So I was trying to leave that open for that reason, but if there's another way to frame it, I'm open to that.
But you could say, you know, open subject to the constraints below or something like that.
Okay.
When someone submits a project in, we're giving them a deadline for that Wednesday at 10 o'clock in the morning. You have all the information. So then we're going to say that you cannot bring information at the meeting because we won't have a chance to review it, and we usually hit blind on it. We should also say that if you do bring stuff to the daily meeting, it's just to clarify something you already submitted already. But if you did not submit something on that topic, like a sun study or whatever, then we're going to say that submission is
We're going to have to
incomplete.
do it, yeah. We're going to automatically continue the hearing.
Yes,
Consider it,
so
or
just-
consider it without it.
So I just want to, we should put that in there saying, if it's not submitted for this, then it could potentially be an incomplete package. New additional information brought in at the meeting can only supplement the information that's already provided prior at the deadline, but it can't be new.
Okay.
I think if we let people know that these are hard and fast deadlines and then no additional information, that I don't want to go hard and fast and say no additional information would be considered, but
True,
I do
but-
want
yeah.
to make it clear that any additional information could potentially subject you to a continuance of the board's discretion.
That's good, yeah. Something like that, so we get a complete package.
Yeah.
As opposed to, oh, here's what we,
No, it's frustrating to have a report or a stack of documents handed to you when you walk in here at 7:15. So.
yeah,
So
here's our
that's the
traffic study.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other idea here is for people to submit things digitally so that we aren't getting so much of that paper stuff on the day of. I mean, it's okay for the plan views to be presented at a meeting, but not supplemental documentation that we've never reviewed before, and not in a digital format that then we have to work with the applicant to get them to submit it so that we can upload it to the website and all that stuff. So everything would tie back to the agenda item, ideally, and would be digitally submitted. So, but I like that suggestion.
Does the open meeting law have a time frame before the meeting by which you have to post the actual agenda items?
Well, it's actually, Laura was saying, the public hearing, we have a whole calendar for.
Just 48 hours?
No, in 48, chapter 48.
Right.
It's 2 weeks.
For 2
For
weeks?
public hearing.
But
Oh, for the
talking
meeting,
about-
48
Yeah,
hours.
the agenda is 48
Oh,
hours.
48 hours,
Okay.
yeah. So we always
So
post
we're
by
okay.
Thursday or Friday. But for public hearings, we have to post that
Right,
much earlier.
right. Yeah, I was asking about the agenda.
Okay, yeah, the agenda is 48 hours.
Is there anything statutory that would give project proponents more right to submit material later than these deadlines?
No, because if it has to do, it's more about the public meeting law. So we should be getting everything during, 48 hours prior to the meeting. You're not supposed to, it's really about considerably amending an agenda item or adding something new to the agenda. So I would argue, I guess, from a proponent's point of view, they're not really amending the agenda, but they're making it difficult for us to fairly review their application. And then most importantly, they're making it difficult for the staff to review as part of our EDR report, which we do.
Yeah.
We prepare in advance of the meeting, and if we haven't seen that submission and then it comes that night, we have no way of providing you any guidance or advice on the proposal. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, I do.
Support that.
Yeah, so it's not, I wouldn't say that it's in the law per se or not in the law. It's more about having an equitable review process.
That makes sense.
Especially now that we put this online in
And then
advance.
the online
Make it
piece.
available to
Yeah.
the public. So, okay, good.
So I can make these amendments and circulate it again if you need me to, or I would also entertain.
Do we need to
I would
vote on this?
I would like it to be adopted by the board as the policy, and then I'd like to post the policy so that it's clear to people who are submitting things.
All right, so I think I'd entertain a motion to approve the Novus Agenda Agreement for the Redevelopment Board as amended. Okay.
So motion?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Annual goals and planning.
All right. So on the goals and planning, I obviously provided a lot of paperwork, which was really just designed to familiarize you with two things. One is the financial plan. That's the FY18 budget, which is both the department budget and the redevelopment board budget. And then the second item in here that's with the header community development is out of the annual report. I thought that both of these documents, when put together, could be a good platform for a conversation about the board's goals and objectives for the coming year. You can read this and see that there's like embedded in the objectives in the FY18 budget are things that relate to the redevelopment board. But I thought it might be helpful if we specifically had a conversation and pulled out the things that we really want to make sure we all agree are priorities for the coming year. That also would help for me to be able to think about staffing of things throughout the year. So for example, things that are clearly priorities of the board, I think, are implementing the master plan and zoning recodification. There are other things in here too, but you may have had a chance to read this. You might have some questions about it, but I wanted to create a separate document, which I don't have here yet, which would be basically a goals document just for the board.
Okay.
with some priorities. And it doesn't have to be many, many pages long. It could be one page. It just would be something clearly communicated that these are our goals for the year. So, glad to answer any questions. Or continue noting some priorities.
Can I ask the first question? Have we, up to this point, had a meeting and talking about what it would mean to implement the master plan in these terms, and come up with, you know, sort of some milestones or some goals headed toward that, other than the whole recodification and then
So the master
next
plan
step?
implementation committee is in
Mhm.
place. They meet once every 6 months.
More than
Quarterly,
that, yeah.
roughly
Quarterly.
quarterly.
And even more so with town meeting, they've met more
Yeah.
often, I think.
But it may be a good idea to have Charlie Kalaskis and Joe Barr update us on what's taken place. I sit on that committee too, but I've actually had to miss the last couple of meetings due to conflicts. See where they are, because
Mhm.
two of the main things that are moving forward from that are the residential study group and zoning recodification. I think most of the thrust of the MPSC has been towards zoning recodification. I think that's kind of taken priority as the main agenda item for
Yeah.
them so far.
And just to add to that, the Master Plan Implementation Committee formed, I think, at the end of 2015, 2016, 2015.
2015.
15, when the minutes.
When it was
It
adopted.
was
It
adopted.
It turned from, yeah, when it was adopted, the committee transformed itself into the Master Plan Implementation Committee.
And then in 2016, they focused on zoning bylaw amendments for that. Well, in 2015, they focused on the housing production plan and then the zoning bylaw amendments that went to the spring 2016 town meeting, which included the mixed use. And then since 2016 annual town meeting, what Andrew was saying is, or just to add to it, was zoning recodification and the residential study group are two of the working groups, but then there's also historic and cultural resources and Millbrook corridor group. But is that something that you'd like to make, to have to hear from Charlie or Joe, or both? To hear more about it, or?
Another thing I could do is, we wrote a pretty comprehensive report to town meeting last spring, element by element, as to what had been accomplished. And actually quite a bit has been accomplished.
Yeah.
Organizationally, does the MPIC sit under our umbrella, and the working groups are then under the MPIC?
Yes.
So just hierarchically, kind of the priorities of each of those groups are, in effect, our priorities.
Yes.
So that could either, those priorities could either come bottom up or top down. So we should think about that.
I think there is a board member on all three of those
Mhm.
committees as well.
Yes.
So, yeah, if you wanted to discuss your priorities, that would be another way to have input besides for Jenny and myself.
Okay, well, we can, this is part of, this could be something that we do over the course. It doesn't have to just be one time, we could do this over the course of the year.
But it is interesting, we have three members who weren't here when it was adopted. Were you here when it was adopted, Ken?
No.
No, so three, yeah, so it might be worth discussing again. We'll
And
give
it
you another
also-
copy
It's
if
also
you don't
time,
have
it's
one.
also time to start thinking
No, no,
about
Could be amended.
reassessing.
It's
It's also time to start thinking about reassessing the master plan
Yeah.
and possibly amending it, because
Right.
by the time that process finishes up, it'll have been 5 years since its adoption, and town
Things change.
goals
Things do change.
and ideas and concerns may
Maybe
have
we could do it in
changed.
less than 2 years, do you think? 2.5 years.
No, because my thinking was that it would have to wait until the recodification was through,
Definitely.
and then we'd begin those discussions.
Well, Laura's going to send us the report on what they've accomplished. Do we want to ask the chairs to come in and tell us what their plan is going forward, what they're intending to do?
Yeah, I think it would be a good idea to have them come in, get their perspective of where things need to move, and where the five of us think zoning should go.
Okay. That would be nice, a nice discussion.
Okay.
Looking at the objectives here, seeing a couple of neglected items for our part.
Yeah.
That are probably part of the master plan as well, as far as working with business district to understand challenges. I know that was a major one there. And this is something that's ongoing, but I don't know what the status is, but assessing ARB property portfolio and determining the need for renewal of the Arlington Center Urban Renewal Plan. That's not something that's been discussed in the 4 years. We've talked about the properties, but as far as the actual center plan,
Center plan.
I haven't talked about that in the 4 years I've been here.
Yep. Not yet?
I'd like to see where that is.
Okay.
Especially, I think that works hand in hand with working with business districts, with the vacancy registry bylaw, with the concerns over what is out there as far as retail, why there are so many empty spaces, whether it's worth it to promote new retail when existing retail is struggling for whatever reason. I have my own ideas on why it's a good idea to promote new retail.
Shoes?
What's that?
You need shoes?
I need shoes.
I thought you were gonna say ice cream.
Or books?
All the ice cream, well,
You're one of the
other
business.
places.
I want more
business.
restaurants.
You want more
Summertime, we need
restaurants?
some ice
It's a
cream right now,
foodie
in fact.
destination.
Yeah, we need more restaurants.
Any other goals or objectives you want to add to this? I've got master plan implementation, sort of business district work, sort of follow-up, and ARB properties. I'm just loosely writing this out. I'll put
Yeah.
something more formal together as a follow-up. Zoning recodification, obviously.
Do we have any economic corridor that we're working on? Or do we set aside for that?
Do we have an economic corridor that we work on?
That we set aside that we think we're going to focus on this being an economic corridor? And let's see what incentives we can do to encourage economic development in that area.
We've never done that as far as I know.
I would say Mass Ave is the primary economic corridor that we focus on, particularly the center. And Allie Carter, who's the economic development coordinator, she's been working on thinking about what to do about Broadway Plaza, follow up on the Mass Ave Phase 2 conceptual plan, and then we're also pursuing some state grant funds around that. So I think that all ties together with sort of thinking about incentives, thinking about other. I think that ties to what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly what I'm
Okay.
trying to get at.
Yeah.
So that is what we've been typing. Did you want
And
to-
I would add also that we are looking to Broadway, where there seems to be quite a bit of potential also for a secondary economic corridor.
It's starting to change right now.
It is starting to change.
And some of the, I guess those brick buildings were built in after the war, and just plopped all over the place, like little Lego
Yeah.
blocks all over the place, and that, I think that will start filtering through that, and it'll make it more of a community than these kind of, I don't know, what do you call those things?
But there are a fair number of kind of industrial, automotive uses that are starting to change hands,
Yes.
which is nice.
Okay.
The other things that I had on my list were, I had capital planning and asset management. That's how I put ARB properties on here. I hope that's all right.
That's fine.
And then I had reviewing the EDR criteria, which we sort of briefly talked about at one of the last meetings. We said
Yeah.
we wanted to maybe look at that later.
Well, I think that's what we had decided as a board, is to look at that into the second phase of zoning recodification, as far as putting the criteria in whatever bylaw comes to be.
But I think that would happen likely over the course of this year,
Right.
this fiscal year.
I mean, we can start that process whenever we want.
Right.
Right.
We just wouldn't be writing anything or putting it in as part of the.
No, we could begin to think of the things
Yeah,
that
it's
we want
not,
in there.
not
We
part
can-
of this phase,
Right.
but we can start that discussion
Yes.
with an eye to the next phase anytime we want it.
Yes. And I would say along those lines, we would be open to any feedback as staff about the process or about things that you think could be strengthened or changed that you're noticing as you continue to review these proposals when they come to the board. So that would all be important data and information for once we actually do make any revisions.
Does the planning department have a set of guidance documents to hand out to people who show up and want to do different things?
We have you mean on any particular thing, or?
Well, I don't know what you have or don't have, and it would be interesting, I think, for the board to maybe get a sense of what the town is able to provide guidance on right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's relevant to us. And
You're talking about requirements.
well, like I've been thinking particularly about bike parking lately, and actually, well,
Just recently?
but thinking about providing more guidance to the
Yes.
developers, so that they don't keep proposing the same poor solutions to us, and and basically try to help them get it right the first time. So I actually did find something that's kind of nonpartisan, non-commercial, and free. So I was going to send that to Laura to take a look at. But that's the kind of thing, to different aspects of the things that are within our purview that the public comes comes before us, and perhaps we can provide better guidance to them so that projects just move along more efficiently.
Yeah, I would say, to answer in there, if there's a question of do we have those, I would say yes we do. Could it be better? Yes, way better. And then as part of zoning recodification, the next step in zoning recodification as part of the RKG contract is for them to work on administrative procedures and also like sort of the process, which I think will be an opportunity for us to say, are we communicating the right things, and are these the right steps that we need to take, and how does what the ARB, what we're doing as a board relate to and intersect with all the other boards and commissions and their decision making, because we have to look at the whole environment of decision making.
Mm-hmm.
But it could be improved dramatically, I think.
We could send the design guidelines as well.
Look at this.
We did. You brought them?
You guys. I have some.
I would like that. I love design
Just
standards.
know that would come up.
We've seen these before.
You have?
Well, I was thinking about our recent conversations of the board and thought it might be handy to have these. They're actually not on the website. I'm going to figure out how to get these on the website. They're from 2015. The board adopted them, it says, at that time. Although it does say that we're still accepting comments.
Where does it say that on here?
In the beginning, yeah. So we can, I thought that at least sharing these with you would be important. I also talked to Andy about this because I had a chance couldn't be here this evening, but we had a chance to speak about it.
So do these get,
yes.
when someone comes in
Yeah.
with a special permit application and has an idea or design in mind,
Mm-hmm.
are these handed to them to use as guidelines for how they should be presenting and how they should be tailoring their plans to fit these standards and the things the board might ask about design and what we want to see?
I would say not consistently, no.
Okay.
There's a digest kind of version of this in the form of a very tall brochure.
I have seen
I've
that.
seen the brochure,
poster.
yeah.
We call it a
I saw
poster.
it, I saw that.
I remember that.
I
I've
think
seen
that's handed out, but not this level of
Right.
detail.
So-
And it would have to be before the application comes in. It has to be when they come in to say, we have an idea, what do you think?
So may I ask, because I know we're in the middle of the conversation about our annual goals, I thought this would be a good conversation for a future goal discussion and also with Andy, because I think he also had a lot to say and was part of this process. Would it be okay to put this on the agenda for what we want to talk about as a board?
I would like to.
I would like to.
I would very much like to.
I think there's definitely an appetite for this discussion.
Is everything in here still consistent with current bylaws?
I
Yeah,
think
pretty,
so.
it's
Yeah.
pretty mixed use, but it actually was meant to go hand in hand.
It does
with
consider that.
the
I think
mixed
it
use.
considers the height
It does.
changes.
Yeah.
And we hired David Gambell to help with some of the designs for the 2016 annual town meeting,
Mhm.
and it was in keeping with this at the time. But there may be some modifications.
Yeah.
No, I like it where it says encourage and discourage. Maybe we should clean it up a little more.
Yeah.
We can look at it. I
Very
think
useful.
going forward is part of the process. I think it's kind of become clear that design, good design, is going to be an important consideration on our part with the way things have changed in town, the way the zoning bylaws have changed to allow for mixed use and increased height. And I think the sense that I'm getting from people on this board is that we're fairly sensitive to what might be built and sit on a corner for the next 100 years. So I think we should look at these, adopt them, or re-adopt them, edit them perhaps, and start to consider it when we look at these projects.
Okay. So I've got that on our goal list.
All right.
The last goal that I wanted to mention is just, we've talked about this at previous meetings, just our various board members participate in lots of different committees or other commissions, and I think it's good to have a regular mechanism to share information from those different groups back to the board. So I thought it might be good to just keep that as a goal. And then along those lines, a new committee that's going to be formed will be addressing recreational marijuana siting and also the buffer zone issue from the medical marijuana.
But anyone can do that, right?
So
Yeah,
we'll come back to
nominated
that,
list.
to membership on that committee at
Oh,
some
I think
point.
it's already me. Fine.
So, but again, participation in committees, and I think just sharing up to the board. And
So how are we going to do the sharing? Could we reserve a few minutes on each agenda?
What,
People to give a really brief overview?
yeah, what we had talked about a while back, I think before you were appointed, Gene, was that we would do a quarter, we would have an agenda item once a quarter, where we would just run down the various committees that people sit on. Many of them get discussed regularly at these meetings: zone recodification, residential study group, master plan. Those are all common things, but things like, the Millbrook study group hasn't been talked about in a long time. I don't even know who sits on the historic
yeah,
resources
we
group
can
at
get
this
an update.
point.
Yeah,
So,
and I will say, when I give directors reports, I've sometimes reported out on the various committees or when an upcoming meeting might be occurring.
There
We can
there are
build that
also
in.
committees that have designees who are not on this board, such as the Open Space Committee, which they never report back to you. There's absolutely no communication in that direction. And what about Vision 2020? Do you have are you, is one of you the designee?
I am.
Yeah,
You are,
both-
okay.
We both participate, but then there's also somebody who participates on behalf of the board.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
that's right.
And I wonder about some of the subgroups too, whether there
Yeah.
are some people who are appointed who don't move for it. It
Yeah,
always
I
seems
have
like
the list
a
of
broken link.
everybody.
I mean, I think quarterly makes sense if there's also the opportunity to say we need to, in between each quarter, discuss what's happening. And,
Mhm.
any of us can suggest putting it on the agenda in between.
Oh, yeah.
There's something
If
going on.
there's ever something that comes
Yeah.
up at the subcommittee, let Jenny know, and then she and I have our weekly discussion about, or semi-monthly weekly discussion about what to put on the agenda. It's fine, I'll put it on. I'll stay here all night.
There's been no CPA meeting since I got appointed.
But just wait.
They'll start meeting a
No,
lot
they happen
soon.
a lot.
Yeah.
It's not,
And then
It's
maybe like
consolidated.
3, 4 times a week. Just wait.
it's seasonal.
Residential study group was meeting once a week for a while, and we've met since May, June,
Mhm. But you're meeting next week,
next week.
so.
What are
Zoning
they
recodification
going to
will be-
look at next? You know?
I missed the last meeting because it was a morning meeting and I had to be in court, so Jerry.
They are looking at, actually, a subgroup is looking at energy efficiency in the zoning bylaw as part of a, in relation to new homes that are constructed. Potentially accessory dwelling or accessory apartments, and there's a subgroup of the group working with the Housing Plan Implementation Committee who's also interested in that particular topic.
Did have tiny houses come up?
Not with that group, no.
Interesting.
I don't know if Housing Plan talked about that. I don't think so.
Very complicated regulatory-wise.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other issues, we talked about design guidelines actually. They want, there's like sort of a split on that group about design standards for residential. These design standards are just for commercial and industrial.
And energy, have you talked about anything about solar panels?
Not specifically solar, but other forms of energy efficient homes. So like net zero.
Okay, because there's a lot of solar panels going on houses right now.
Right.
And they're not addressing that, or they don't really care about that, or?
I don't know that they don't care about it. I haven't been part of those conversations, so I don't know if
Okay.
that has.
The person leading the discussion in that group is very focused on net zero homes and new construction efficiency.
That person worked for Zender, something like that. They're the ones that started the whole net zero craze in Germany.
Wow.
The last item actually that the group is talking about is the noise abatement and continuing to potentially make changes to the noise abatement regulations in the town bylaw, as well as following up on the rock removal regulation, which this board talked about last fall town meeting, which we do need to pick up and think
there
about
was
again.
a citizen initiated bylaw
But
proposal
then we
voted down.
we discussed it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We should come back around on that.
we do need to do that.
Yeah.
So those were the 4 things that are being currently discussed. That's it.
Okay.
All right, so I have master plan implementation, working in the business districts, a number of things related to that, ARB property asset management, zoning recodification, reviewing the EDR criteria, design standards, and our participation or designees' participation in a range of committees, regular report back. I can draft this into something that looks like real goals and objectives for the year, and then we can talk about it again.
Okay.
Great.
Okay,
Yeah, maybe we can talk about those other items at the same time.
sure. Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
good. We are way ahead of schedule. Conservation Commission regulations.
Okay, I couldn't get anybody to attend the meeting tonight, but I did get sort of the summary of like the four things that are being proposed as amendments in the regulations. I can review that with you if that would be helpful.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So the first is the issue of, I guess, ensuring that resource areas are not disturbed during project work. That's the, you'll see it inserted throughout the document, the resource area enhancement. There's a bunch of different references to resource area enhancement. There's a new definition of it. It's referenced kind of throughout the document when they're talking about disturbances to project areas. They changed one existing definition of lot. A lot of areas they got a little bit more specific than what's in the current regulations, including having applicants provide more detailed planting plans, replacement of shade trees. And then the fourth item is the more detail to the aura, or the adjacent upland resource area. And that's probably where they put the most edits, which is towards the end of the document.
Yeah, there's a whole new section.
A whole addition to that section about, and most of it is about very specific guidelines about how to treat the adjacent upland resource area, the aura, and also how much new impervious area can be added to that kind of zone. That's like the summary of the comments, of the amendments rather. They asked for, at least by email, for us to get our feedback to them if we have any feedback by the 20th, which is rapidly approaching.
Can I send it to you then?
You could send me your comments and then I can compile something.
The one major comment I had was just if they can do some sort of census of what is wetlands, what is considered wetlands in Arlington.
Beyond what's on the wetlands map?
The map's not that clear. I think it needs a clear earth. I'll bring up one example. You know, there's one person that did the addition, and then they found out there was a no-name stream. You know about that one, right, Laura?
Mm-hmm. It is the no-name street, right?
Correct.
That's
The
the name
no-name
of
brook.
it.
Yes,
Yeah,
no-name brook or something like that.
Yeah.
And they had to actually tear down the addition that they built because it was within. So if we get some sort of clear definition exactly where it is, or a way of figuring it out, so if someone went to say, I want to do something here, there's a database to check against.
No, it's impossible because the state database on wetlands is not 100% accurate. It's just a starting point, and people, if they want to do something, sometimes have to get a wetland scientist or a wetland biologist to go out at the site. And sometimes it's easy to see, but sometimes they have to dig into the dirt and see what's there and look at the vegetation and see what's there. So it's sort of possible to give a fuzzy line. It is not possible to give a clear, bright line, partially because the state maps are incomplete, and partially because you don't necessarily know what the boundary is until somebody actually goes out and does a formal wetland delineation, and then they're only good for a few years.
But then you're forcing this burden on, I'm just thinking.
You're forcing the burden on the property owner.
Yes,
You
who's,
absolutely are.
let's say someone owns a piece of property
Right.
and they just want to add a bedroom or add a family room to their house. And it's not black and white or not very clear, so now they have to hire a scientist
They do.
to
They
go look at that, see if that's a wetland or not, or even have a scientist perform something, see if that's a vernal pool, and if there's any creature, you know,
They have to do that. That's the way the state law works.
Okay, is there a way for us to help maybe help them along that way, saying, you know, like, no, you're pretty far away, or no, you're in a proximity, maybe we can ask the come take a look at this as a preliminary, I don't know, I'm just bringing up suggestions of maybe a way of.
Some commissions will have a staff person go out and take a look and say, you know, yeah, you're clearly far away, don't worry about it.
Mhm.
But if you're not clearly far away, don't worry about it, they have to meet the federal wetlands delineation manual, which does involve getting somebody with some level of expertise to say where the actual line is. The commission can't go out and
So you're
just
saying it's
look.
beyond the towns,
Unless the town wants to train somebody to do wetland delineation and then offer that service for some fee to homeowners.
So that is something usually that the conservation administrator does, is some level of resource area delineation during the permitting process, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that would catch everything, or that it would mean that the property owner does not need some external party to help with that delineation and/or the process. Doesn't necessarily eliminate it.
well, I'm not trying to eliminate the expert on delineating, is there one, I'm just trying to figure out a way where you can inform the homeowner, is one required or not?
They- I mean, I don't know how ours does it, but a lot of commissions, the homeowner can go in before they start something, and the commission or the staff person will go out and take a look and give a sort of informal, it doesn't seem to be a problem, or you need to actually go get the wetland delineated.
Well, who enforces it, the town or the state?
The town is required by state law to enforce it, and if the town doesn't do it, it can be overridden by the state.
Maybe if you write out, if you want to write me an email with your comment and you have if you want to outline a specific scenario and ask how this might be addressed in the current regulation or by the Conservation Commission, then I can help to either answer it or forward your question.
I'm not even sure how.
Yeah, the Conservation Administrator, who's currently a consultant, is in the Department of Planning and Community Development. So so I can, if you want to write something out, I'm happy to continue to follow up.
I find it kind of frustrating sometimes when you're looking through that and not understanding.
Maybe you can provide the specific example, and then I can learn more about that one.
Okay, well.
With the no-name brook.
No-name brook is a good prime example of a homeowner who, did everything right.
Yeah.
Or thought they did everything right.
Okay, well, I can.
Did they know there was a brook there?
No,
They didn't even know there was a brook?
there was no brook there. It was not a brook. It was, I think it was drainage off the bike path or something. I don't know. I can't say, okay? I'm not, but it became, there was no maps showing that was a brook or anything. I'm just hearing this like secondhand, okay?
There is actually an interactive online mapping system. It's like People GIS online. Anybody can go to the map and map a specific parcel and see all of the resource areas, the buffer zones, the riverfront area, like literally every little piece is mapped out. So that's why I'm curious about that particular property.
But how often is that updated?
It's very as up to date as it can be, based on what Jean said. It's using probably some parcel data that comes from the state that might not be as up to date, but I think that most of our inventory is pretty up to date.
Okay.
So I'm curious about that particular parcel. But if you had a comment about the process or how things are delineated, I could also help answer that question.
Okay, I'll try to write something up. Yeah,
Okay.
I read this over, by the way. I thought they were reasonable amendments to it. Nothing jumped out at me as unusual or unreasonable.
Do we, as a board, ever look directly at this when we're looking at a project, or are we relying on something that the Conservation Commission has done?
So in my time here, I have not seen us use this, but we have had applicants who then need to go to the Conservation Commission for a separate permitting process. I would say though for larger projects, my understanding is that in the past, there's usually a group of people representative of various boards and commissions who might participate in a larger scale development process, so that leads to sort of joint reviews. We're not using their bylaw or regulatory process, but we're participating.
Any large-scale project before my time, I think that's how it worked with SAPs.
Oh, yes, definitely with Simpson.
Okay.
And Mill,
Yeah, with Brigham's.
Brigham's.
And also the 40B on, any 40B that we've had a site plan review meeting beforehand.
Good. Meeting minutes. I did not have a chance to take a look at these.
Can I just have, I want to change the word reducing the size of the building to lowering the building.
Or reducing the height.
Hmm?
Or reducing the height, you're saying?
Yes, not the actual size of the building, you just want to lower it down and not put it on this percent, and then get rid of this.
Yeah, because you weren't asking them to shrink it, you were asking them to lower it.
Yes, and that got rid
What
of it.
paragraph were you in?
The last line on the first page.
And on the last page, I don't think he said that it would significantly reduce runoff from the site. I think what he said is they would retain a 100-year storm on the site.
Yeah, I think that's what he said.
That's Sullivan down there. I didn't go back and review.
Yeah, I think
the
he said there
tape,
would be
but
no
runoff
runoff.
up to a 100-year storm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's when I asked him like how they measured the 100-year storm.
There would be no runoff.
I think he said they'd retain on site a 100-year storm.
I think that's what he said.
Yeah.
From,
That's a lot of water.
Yes, it is a lot of water.
Because
And that's what he said.
last week where it rained that heavily, I'm working in Hanscom right now. The airport flooded. It had 2 feet of water in the airport. That was not a 100-year storm.
So this was the, well, I won't get into it, but I wasn't that comfortable with what he used to figure out the 100-year storm. But I still haven't followed up on your email with the engineering department about it.
do you want to say more than that?
No, because
No.
that's what he said.
There would be no runoff from the site from a 100-year storm.
Correct.
Right, that's what he said.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
And if you say reduce the height, it'll be fine.
Reduce the height, yes, I got that.
That was my email.
Okay.
Move to approve the minutes as noted.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any other business?
Could I just get, just back to the previous agenda item, could I just get an understanding? I'm going to write a little comment letter to the Conservation Commission.
Yeah,
It's
I think
meant to be brief.
Yeah,
but
I think Jean said it perfectly. I think the changes are reasonable. That makes sense. I think they go further than other communities do. I think that's positive. Like for Arlington.
So,
They actually have maybe the best regulations around.
Yeah. Yeah.
is it all right if I submit that on your behalf?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can vote on that.
Yeah, just wanted to confirm.
We do need to vote to adjourn, unless anyone has any thoughts.
Did we approve the minutes? Yes.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.